Well, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time it is that you're seeing this show. Welcome to the Don McKeag Show. I've been doing this show for quite some time now through Plymouth and through Carver. And happy Election Day will be coming up after this show airs. I have been in Carver now for several years. I once owned the Cranebrook restaurant, and unfortunately with the business times and other things, we are not open there anymore. I still live in Carver, however. I do this show for a variety of reasons, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope it's entertaining and informative. When you've lived as long as I have now and you've seen the changes, it's very disconcerting. Some of my background, those that have watched the show, there are several shows, by the way, on YouTube. All you have to do is go to the Don McKeag Show on YouTube, and we have, I think, over 40 shows, should you be interested. My background is varied, not only in the restaurant business, but as a former educator, teacher and coach. Also, as I say, I owned many restaurants, several big ones on Cape Cod. I've been an entertainer, and I've run for public office as state rep for Dukes County, which was Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and parts, of course, of Cape Cod. I've spent most of my business career and adult career on Cape Cod, but I was from Weymouth, Massachusetts. The purpose of my doing this show and continuing for as long as I can is to hopefully not look to denigrate others or other sides of the argument. I was a John F. Kennedy Democrat. It was the first president I could vote for. I went to the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and it was such an exciting time. Nothing like today. Nothing like the problems, the divisions, and the outrageous behaviors by politicians especially, but mostly the media. Now, I know I am speaking on the media, but it is my purpose to try to give some common sense and some honest information to people out there in this audience. I never thought, nor did anyone in our age group ever think, that we were to see this wonderful country. No matter what you hear, no matter how they denigrate it in colleges, no matter how they denigrate it on television, there has never been a country like the United States of America. And it bothers me that our young people today hear the things they hear about this country. We're human beings. We're not perfect. But our government has proven to be the greatest form of government that there has ever been on the face of this planet. And it is only the individuals running it that are tearing it apart. We forget, and our young people are not being taught this, but we've always been, as human beings, capable of greed, lust, arrogance, anger, all of those 7 deadly sins that now are running rampant because it's a self-centered, godless society for many. We have a country, we have a media now that denigrates those who have strong religious beliefs, whatever religion. But especially those who have Christian beliefs, because the temper of this particular country now and of the media is to have minority rule. The majority obviously is always going to be abusive to minorities. And this is a mentality, unfortunately, that I mentioned before has come out of colleges now. I was just talking with Dylan here, and I was mentioning that there's no question in my mind, after being in teaching for 13 years, at a minimum of 30% of today's college students have no business being in college, academically, emotionally, financially, or any other way. But this culture has, the elitist, the liberal culture, has made parents feel less than if their kids aren't going to college. They have made the young people feel less than. Even though these colleges now are putting so many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of American hard-working families in debtors' prisons, or the students themselves, it'll take them years, if ever, to get out from under the burdens of their educational costs. Why? So we can pay politicians and professors $300,000 to teach one course? Or so we can tell our young people that they're somehow better for have graduated from college? That's not the case today. And having been in education, I've seen so many wonderful students who wanted to be carpenters or plumbers or electricians or own a restaurant or start their own small business. I've seen them detoured by their parents or by the societal pressures that are out there into thinking they had to go to college. This is one of the things that has to really be addressed, and I hope that President Trump will do this. He's talked about it. The Department of Education, along with the Department of Energy, all of these there's so many governmental agencies that have been created for one purpose and one purpose alone. That is to create more government jobs and to create more regulations and to create more discord in our society. Now, after 20 years of doing radio, and I'm on every Saturday on Cape Cod on 95.1 FM, and you can listen from 11 to 1. But in all these years, I've seen it. I've seen the changes, and I've bemoaned what young people today are having their heads filled with. I'm a huge supporter of education. Don't ever misinterpret. I'm a huge supporter of minority issues. This isn't it. It has to do, though, with what holds the country together and what is good for all of us. I start my shows off, and I didn't with this one, but I'll get to it. Martin Luther, who was a devoted Roman Catholic priest, lived from 1483 to 1546, died at the age of 63. He's also the man that was Martin Luther King, who we just celebrated his day last Monday. And he was named for this man, who I would venture to say 70% of the population has no idea who the real Martin Luther was. And what he did is he took on the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. Now, the reason I always want to talk about this is because the parallel between what happened in 1526, which is when he made the statement I'm going to read to you, what happened then is what's happened in this country for the same reason. And any other failing government or failing moral society. The word moral now is just laughed at from Hollywood and the rest of them. Young people think they should be able to do, say, and be anything to anyone that they want to. That there are no kinds of behaviors that are unacceptable. I'll quote some of them, or I'll mention some of them. But what Martin Luther did was take on a corrupt hierarchy of the Catholic Church. The popes, the cardinals, they were corrupt in these times, 500 years ago. It wasn't the Catholic Church itself. It was not the religious dogma of Catholicism. It was the people running it. This is what we are facing right now, and why people like me, whether it's a waste of time or not, I don't know. But to me, I have to try to give and do my little part of pointing out the things that I've learned over my 75 plus years. That is, there's nothing wrong with this wonderful country's form of government. It is the best. It is a system of checks and balances. It is the people that have been elected, the people who are looking out now, both parties, more for themselves than they are for you and me and for the country in general. It's a culture of greed. It's a culture of false idols, idolatry. We have more and more award shows for people who spend their lives pretending to be someone else. We have people denigrating a viable, legally elected man, and this happens to be Donald Trump. People like myself who are supporting him understand his flaws personally in terms of what and how he says things. But when we have a country that no longer believes in the election process, no longer believes in the system which has worked for over 200 years, although there are those who have predicted that every democracy is lucky to last 200 plus years, for the same reason of what we're going through. Martin Luther once said, and why I continue to repeat this every show that I do, radio or television, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe nor politic nor popular, but he or she must take that position because your conscience tells you it is right. This goes back to behavior. This goes back to a loss of class in this culture of ours. I've watched it. I watched it when I was teaching. I'm wearing this tie. Every time I go to any kind of a speaking engagement, every time I go to a church service, a funeral, a wake, I put on a jacket and a tie. It's just a position that I take that used to be universal in this country. Watch Turner Network channel the movies, the old movies. Watch how people are dressed in the airport. Watch how they're dressed going to church. Watch how they're dressed getting on an airplane. And now look at people. It's the easy way out. I see members of town boards on public television and elsewhere in t-shirts. Now, the thoughts of the day now, because of course we're allowing young people to dictate everything. I consider it insulting to the people who have elected people for not putting on a little special look that shows that you respect the office, you respect the trust that the people have given you, and you're going to appear in terms of physicality or anything else in that fashion. You look at how people talk today. I know this is an old man talking, but I'm going to say it because it needs, I believe, to be said more. When I was young in high school, if anyone used the F word, it was a man, and the person would be accosted physically or otherwise. Now we have the women using it. I guess that makes it cool. We have behaviors that are just absolutely without class, and I'm not talking about low-class people. I'm talking about the so-called upper crust. We have Hollywood, who actually thinks they set standards for the public, and they do. We have people my age, for heaven's sake, going to church with baseball shirts on, football shirts on, hats on backwards. Now, some would say, oh, who cares? Well, this is part of the deterioration of the high standards that we used to have in this country that were admired throughout the world. America still is held high. But there are things I'm going to talk about today that have to be said in terms of our future. Politicians are the only people in the world who create problems and then campaign against them. Have you ever wondered if both the Democrats and the Republicans are against deficits, why do we have them? You don't hear the media talking this way, you see. What we have to remember is news wants chaos. News wants people not getting along. Unfortunately, politicians also pander to division. They don't pander to pulling people together. Anyway, good question, isn't it? How come if both parties don't want to have this, we have these trillions and trillions of dollars deficits, why do we have them? If all the politicians are against inflation and high taxes, why do we have inflation and high taxes? You and I, we don't have any control over the financial budget. The president does. You and I don't have the constitutional authority to vote on appropriations. The House of Representatives does. You and I don't write the tax code. Congress does. You and I don't set fiscal policy. Congress does. You and I can't control monetary policy. That's done by the Federal Reserve Bank. 100 senators. Now think about this, and think about who we have representing us. There are only 100 senators who are the most powerful governing body in this country. 100. They dictate laws, pass laws for over 300 million people. 9 Supreme Court justices, 435 congressmen and women, 1 president. All of these adds up to 545 people. They're the ones that dictate and determine directly our legal things, our moral things, and the individual responsibility we have for the domestic problems that we are facing, the racial upheaval. I'm sorry, this president has created much of it. We talk about fairness. We talk about evening the playing field. This is something I've seen as an educator, as a businessman. We have racists out there. The trouble is they're in all colors. The black population is 12.2%. That's all. And yet the media and others would have you think that it's 40 to 50%. Now, why is this important? It isn't important. It shouldn't be important, except when it goes the other way. Why don't we have more white players playing football and basketball if it's about numbers and about fairness? But what we have now is we have people trying to make up for past problems. You can't do it. You address them, but you can't do it. We just had Martin Luther King Day, which I totally support. I was around when President Kennedy, I was at the University of Mass. I was brokenhearted when he was killed. And I was terribly, terribly the same when Martin Luther King was shot, as Bobby Kennedy. So I was in my 20s when all those 60s, those hard, tough, awful things happening to this country. And a lot of us at that age wondered where we were heading, what was going on. But what has happened in the minds, and I'm sorry, I am a conservative, and I am definitely straight up front, I blame liberalism for much of our problems today. Because it comes from elitists. It comes from people who live one way and then want us to live another. Hollywood being one of the great examples. They have 4 or 5 palaces all around the world and then talk about global warming and talk about atmosphere. The rest of us keeping our heat on too high or flying too often. We have these politicians like this outgoing president, for heaven's sake, talking about fairness financially, trying to level the playing field, trying to make the rich pay more, and they take vacations for millions and millions and millions of dollars. They're taking them right now with a week left. John Kerry doing the same. That's the hypocrisy of politicians, and it just happens to be the Democrats that I'm mentioning, but there are Republicans equally guilty. Equally guilty. But now when you say, if you look at this particular, all the special interests and lobbyists for, the whole purpose of why I'm talking about this, they have no legal authority. We talk about, all the huge corporations. I don't care if it's Exxon Mobil, I don't care if it's Ford Motor Company, I don't care what it is. They do not have the power that the politicians have. Wouldn't you like to be able to dictate your salary? Wouldn't you like to be able to pass a law that can increase your salary? We just had it in Boston. Boston City Council gave themselves a $10,000 raise. They're getting like $91,000. They wanted to get $118,000 plus insurance plus travel. The Boston City Council. It used to be a selectman. The word selectman. We forget where that came from. That came from the fact that most town fathers that took over the governing of their town were successful, either businessmen or otherwise, in their town. They did it for a giving back to the town, not for a salary. That's why for years, when I was young, they didn't pay any money. They didn't pay to be a state rep or state senator. It was supposed to be. That's why you got the benefits. You got the insurance. You got your travel allowances. You got other bonuses, other benefits. It was never supposed to be a $100,000 job. And remember, all those people representing us up on Beacon Hill, their schedule is basically just like a school teacher. Half year, 180 days. And they make the rules for all of us. They constantly regulate the business community. That's why I left the Democratic Party. They are anti-business. Why? Because there's more votes in the public employee union base. That's where the Democrats went. You don't have to like it, but it happens to be the truth. Now, here's where these 545 people I'm talking about that determine the life in America for 300 million, they spend much of their energy convincing you that what they did is not their fault. They cooperate in this common con regardless of party. What separates a politician from a normal human being is an excessive amount of gall. No normal human being would have the gall of a speaker, capital S, who stood up and criticized the president for creating deficits. The president can only propose a budget. He cannot pass it. Congress has to accept it. The Constitution, which used to be the supreme law of the land, gives sole responsibility to the House of Representatives for originating and approving appropriations and taxes. Who's the Speaker of the House? Nancy Pelosi. She's the leader of the majority party. This is before this last election. The Republicans will now be in charge. But my point is, let's see if they make any difference. They have an opportunity to do something. Are they going to do it? It seems inconceivable to me that a nation of over 300 million people cannot replace 545 people who stand convicted by present facts of incompetence and irresponsibility. I can't think of a single domestic problem that is not traceable directly to those 545 people. When you fully grasp the plain truth that 545 people exercise the power of our entire federal government, then it must follow that what we have, what exists, what isn't working, is their fault. They're the ones that pass the law. They're the ones that do the vote. And yet the media and others have put it on you and me. This is why I'm doing this show today. I'm appalled at the treatment of this duly elected new president. It's not his fault that he got elected. He's his own worst enemy. What the problem is these politicians, when he says he's going to drain the swamp, all this behavior is proving that swamp is there in Washington, and it's in our colleges. Imagine the thought. You have grown kids, they're 20s, you're paying $40,000 and $50,000 a year to send them to college, picking up the debt. Many parents I've known have driven a used car for years so they could put the money aside for their kids to go to college. And now over a presidential election, you've got college professors crying. You've got colleges offering grief counseling. Instead of telling our young people, listen, this is the way it is. We don't have to like it. This is why we are America. Things don't always work the way we want. But this is what's happened with liberalism. This is what's happened when every kid gets a trophy in a game now. Doesn't matter if they're good or bad, if they play or don't play. Teachers are told they can't give an F. It's too traumatic for a kid. What are they going to do when they have a failed relationship or lose a job or have bad health or lose a child or lose their father or mother? This is that feel-good mentality which is now at the peak. And I'm on here just doing my small part to point it out. If the tax code's unfair, it's because our politicians want it to be unfair. How come you listen to liberals talking about the wealthy aren't paying enough? But no, the liberals don't care that there are people coming in here illegally, not paying anything. Never mind they're here illegally, they are not contributing. You go to the Social Security office, and guess what? There's 16 or 17 nationalities posted there that we provide translators for them. Now the question begs to be answered. It certainly begs to be asked. What are they doing here? How much have they contributed to Social Security? They're threatening us with Social Security drying up. How? It used to be untouchable by the government until President Johnson, during the Vietnam War, decided he asked Congress for a special opportunity to try to pay for the war, and they granted it to him. It never went back to the fact that it was a contributory for all of us, the wealthy, the poor. If you work, you are paying into Social Security. The other thing I don't like about public employee attitudes, automatic raises, why? Just for showing up? But the real reason I don't like it is very few people in this country and in the private sector realize that I don't care if you're working for the town, if you're working for this station here, if you're working in a restaurant, the owner or the town or the federal government matches whatever's withheld from your paycheck for Social Security. I'll bet you right now there's people out there listening and watching this show that don't know that. My small restaurant, in addition to my payroll, I had 18 employees, most of them part-time. All of them, my accountant deducted Social Security contributions, and I matched it. And every single week it cost me $630 to match it on top of the salaries. So when a politician or when any of your public employees get raises, just remember, it's not just the raise they're getting, you're also paying, as a taxpayer, you're paying for matching of all the Social Security figures. If the budget's in the red, it's because Congress wants it in the red. If the Army and the Marines are in Iraq, it's because they want them there. If they do not receive Social Security but are on an elite retirement plan not available to the people, it's because they want it that way. That's what Congress has. They have an elite special retirement plan. I believe they only have to do 2 terms. There are no insoluble government problems. Do not let these 545 people shift the blame to bureaucrats whom they hire and whose jobs they can abolish, to lobbyists whose gifts and advice they can reject, to regulators to whom they give the power to regulate and from whom they can take away this power if it's abused. Above all, don't let them con you into the belief that there exists a disembodied mystical forces like, quote, the economy or inflation or politics that prevent them from doing what they take an oath to do. You see, this has been my complaint for a long time, that politicians at all levels, very rarely do they care about one of the biggest reasons they're in that seat, and that is to be fiscally responsible for our money. It's not their money. It's our money. That 545 group of people are responsible for the whole thing. They have the power to change things. Now, that can only happen if the voters have the gumption to manage the people they have representing them. Let's get this perfectly straight, ladies and gentlemen. Donald Trump is going to be president because a huge amount of this population are fed up, both parties. And I've said this in one of the other shows, and I'm going to repeat it. Let's get this perfectly straight. Without the Electoral College, we will not have a country. But we don't have college professors, we don't have high school teachers teaching our young people about economics, about politics. I told you one of the things I was most dismayed about were young people, wonderful people, working for me in the restaurant in Carver who did not really know anything about John Carver, for whom their town and their school was named. Bill O'Reilly had a show on where he has that, what's his name, Matters or Waters, I guess his name is, and he's interviewing people down in Plymouth by the Plymouth Rock. Young people, middle-aged people, knew nothing to speak of about Plymouth, about the background, about the heritage. And I've said this before. This has been done by people who resent what this country came from. And they have hooked their whole emotional beliefs on the evil of slavery. No one disputes slavery as being a horrible chapter in the United States of America. It's not the whole book, nowhere near the whole book. And I began the show talking about Martin Luther King Day. But through these 545 people, and especially those 9 Supreme Court judges, why it's so important who the president is and who he or she puts in there to represent us. None of them, they were all complicit in the fact that we have a Martin Luther King Day, but we don't have an Abraham Lincoln Day or a George Washington Day. They lopped all the other presidents together, the good and the bad. What about the great? Now, if that's racist, so be it. I plead guilty. But the man who freed the slaves, the man who took on more from his own people than anyone before or since until Trump, in a different way. He's not honored by this country to have his own day. Now, does that make any sense to you? Doesn't to me. But how many people are going to talk about it? Political correctness. No, don't talk about that. That's not fair. That's racist. No, it isn't racist. No, it isn't racist. It's the truth. And it's undermined our country, and it's now showing its ugly head. We have got to do something. We have politicians that first take care of themselves and their family. Both parties. Hollywood. My word, look at what the little bit you know about their... It's like Sodom and Gomorrah out there, and it has been, only it's worse now. They glorify any perverted situation there is. They moan and groan about violence, and that's how they earn their living. California. How many of you know that all this nonsense about the popular vote and how unfair and how this is the only reason Trump's in there? We've got to get rid of the Electoral College. I mentioned that's because people don't know. Students all the way up to adults, large adults. California, the largest insane asylum in the country, California. Do you know that they estimate that over 2 million or close to 2 million of those so-called votes that went to Hillary more than Trump, which was true. But they don't do an analysis of the fact that that would allow one state, along with New York, to dictate who the president's going to be. Now this is for both parties. This is why the Electoral College is there. But what they don't say in the media and what the professors don't tell you is, in California, controlled by liberal Democrats, it's got, I think, the 6th largest economy in the world, just one of our states. They talked about leaving the union. I said, good luck. Good. Get rid of them. Put up a wall outside of California. But just think about this. They passed a law in the California Democrat-controlled legislature that allowed illegals. They have the largest illegal population in the country in California. And they're not picking fruit, let me tell you. Less than 2% are actually working in terms of the fruit industry. They passed a law which allows illegals, we're not talking legal immigrants, but even immigrants that are legal. The insanity of liberalism allows them to get a driver's license. Then California has another law on the books that if you have a driver's license, you can vote for president. Ta-da! What do you think, folks? Anybody with a fair brain? Liberal Democrats? Do you know that? Did you know that? And they say at least 80% of those popular votes that they're so whining about over this election were illegals. Is that what you want? You want the illegal population to dictate who's going to be president? Some of you do. Our nitwit state, you know. Amherst, where I went to college, they wanted to allow illegals to vote. Do you understand that? This is what I mean about this mentality that's taken over control. Because men especially haven't stood up and said, none of this feeling stuff. No. Girls aren't going to play football with the boys. It's too dangerous. Remember, they went through that for a while. Till one girl died. She was 14 or 13. That nonsense. There's certain things, yes. Here's what I wanted to, how do you like this about immigrants? This was just in the paper last week. Martin Walsh, liberal Democrat in the tank mayor of Boston. Another thing you don't know, a lot of people don't know, is you are paying for Boston's bills too, you know. The state, our state tax goes into Boston, a lot of the money there. Anyway, there's a talk about, this is what I mean. Those of you that, I had business, I had to go to court a couple of times on business situations. Donald Trump, other people in business, they pay huge money to lawyers. Marty Walsh, well, he's not certain yet, but he's talking about whether or not the taxpayer, he doesn't call it the taxpayer, whether we are going to be paying for illegals' court costs. Now, what is it going to take for insanity, the word insanity, to hit the Democrat liberal leadership? What is it going to take? Cops increasingly denying requests to hold illegals. Federal immigration officials have been increasingly blown off by Boston area authorities when they asked that illegals in police custody be detained for possible deportation. Remember that beautiful girl in San Francisco that was murdered by a guy who was supposed to have been deported not once, not twice, 5 times? But the do-gooders, the liberals, don't want to deport any of these people, especially when they know they have criminal behavior. You tell me that we haven't got an insane mentality for anyone to think that that's okay, that innocent Americans, Arizona, how they reelected McCain, I don't know. They've had people over there murdered. They've had people beaten that own property along the borders. Guess why you don't know it? Because it's not politically correct. Because our wonderful newscasts don't want to publish anything that might show their side to be absolutely off the tracks. Newton now. Newton, Massachusetts. Now you've heard about sanctuary cities. Talk about, this is breaking the law, allowing illegals safe refuge. It sounds like a war. How can you not say that's insane? Illegals who don't pay taxes. Newton. But they don't want to call it. See, they're not going to call it what it is. Don't call us a sanctuary city. A rose beneath the name is still a rose, a wise poet once remarked. In Newton, the Democrat, hard to believe it would be a Democratic city committee, together with support from 8 city councilors who just got the $10,000 raise when they wanted 20, and Democrat Senator Cynthia Cream is pushing to make Newton a sanctuary city in action only. See, they don't even have the guts to call it a sanctuary city because they want to avoid any punishment that they know is probably going to come under the regime of Donald Trump, who's not going to take this nonsense. So that's what we've got in the United States of America and in Massachusetts, and that's what you've got if you keep voting for the same people. Dylan, we're nearing the end, are we, lad? Well, I want to thank you for listening. And all this nonsense about Putin, which I don't know, but you know, one of the sad things is that at the end of this Mr. Obama's administration, Russia now has the poorest opinion of the United States, worse than at the end of the Cold War. Now, if that's your definition of doing a good job, then there's something wrong with you. We should be getting along with Russia. Not sticking up for Putin, but I am saying that we will do much better, I believe, with someone like Donald Trump and others with some courage, like Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. how you Democrats, you Jewish Democrats, have been able to continue supporting this president and supporting the Democratic Party, who basically wants to leave Israel at the mercy of the Middle East. I will never understand. But there's lots I don't understand. Thanks for listening. I hope some of this has been informative, and God bless you. And let's support this president. Give him a chance. That's the American way, or it used to be. We certainly gave minorities plenty of chance in this state with a black governor, a black president, neither of whom have done a job that I think we had hoped for. But that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to give people a chance. I guess it only applies, though, to liberal Democrats or minorities. I'm Don McKeag. It's the Don McKeag Show. And again, God bless.